Good morning, everyone. It's another episode of Marijuana Channel 1. I am your host, Dave Rheins, reaching you from sunny or maybe not so sunny Seattle. You know, we're coming up on the derby days here in Redmond, and usually this is the height of summer, but we're still in our Polar Tech and long sleeve shirts. It is my pleasure to welcome, I should say, a dear friend of mine and one of my artistic influencers, even well before there was such a social media nomenclature, Caleb Camus from an arty suburb of Los Angeles. Welcome, Caleb.
Thank you, David. This was all incubated in Florence, as you recall. And I think we were drinking that summer. There was a big scandal in Italy that like half of the Chianti you were drinking was actually antifreeze. That would explain some stuff, right?
Well, you know, that's funny. Yeah. So I have had the pleasure of knowing you, Caleb, before, not only before the internet, not only before social media, but really even before I was in the rock and roll business. I was coming out of the Peace Corps.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you were still just kind of a crazy kid with a dream.
I still thought I was going to be a musician back then, and a writer and a creative.
And you're right.
And and I bumped into you in some alleyway in Florence, 3 sheets to the wind, if I can remember.
Yeah, Tom Fisher and I it was an amazing coincidence that I hooked up with a hometown friend in Marseille originally, and then we just drifted over to Florence. And Tom and Dave had been roommates in the Peace Corps in Africa, like 3,000 miles south, and bang, met up.
Yeah, and it was like, in this, again, it was after midnight, well after midnight, in a dark alley coming out of a bar, and I ran into my Peace Corps roommate 6 months after we were out, or 3 months after we were out. That's the serendipity of life. Life is, I used to always say, taking a page from Yoko Ono, who said that she, lived or celebrated the cosmic giggle. In fact, I remember that was the motto that was written on the Rolling Stone phone list. My first gig at Rolling Stone, my first gig out of the Peace Corps, my first real gig, was working at Rolling Stone answering the phones, and that was written at the bottom. We believe in the cosmic giggle, and I do believe in the cosmic giggle. And I think that maybe cannabis powers a little bit of that cosmic laughter as well. So tell me, Caleb, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a musician. You've had a crazy life. What's the role of cannabis in all that? Did you grow up? You grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Which, I grew up in Indianapolis, not too far north of there. And, cannabis was just marijuana, we always called it back then, was certainly illegal, but very prevalent. Did you have a childhood relationship with weed?
Childhood. I think I was 13 at Tom, that old Tom Devil, I shouldn't say his name, but that old devil, your Peace Corps roommate, and his brother. How much of it was the power of suggestion? I don't really know, but somebody told me that back around that time that there was a whole lot of like really heavy indica, Colombian indica floating around. and also, Nixon was still around. Yeah, Nixon was still around. And I mean, I just don't think it is possible to get that stoned. No matter how hybrid, it's like there can't be another Beatles. You cannot get as stoned on a certain astral level as you could in 1973 when it was a real active.
Oh, that's an interesting notion, Caleb, because that's a little counterintuitive. I mean, we talk about the legacy brands and the legacy strains here in legal weed, and those were testing at pretty small THC levels compared to what you're seeing commercially these days. And in fact, you're seeing some politicians and conservative talking heads blame hyper powerful weed on mass shootings and general psychosis.
If they wanted to stop mass shootings, they give cannabis to all these people instead of guns.
So you did smoke weed back in the day, and tell me about that. Did you give it up? Did you?
It was just like sort of. I was spewing out of a champagne bottle, just like woo. And but no, wait a minute. I think I smoked it a couple of times before I registered any effect, which is kind of. That there's some metabolic reason.
That's normal. It is absolutely. I remember, the first couple of times smoking and people around me got high, and I just kind of looked around and going, okay, when do I get mine? It's kind of like waiting for those acid flashbacks they promised us all those years ago. I made all that investment and still haven't gotten any free trips. Not sure why that is, but it is. It is the case. So are you a lifelong toker?
No.
Or did you give it up? You gave it up for years, right? I mean, you were kind of demon alcohol was your gig for a long time.
The interesting thing about pot is I smoked a little bit here and there in high school because it was trickier then. And I really got into it freshman and sophomore year in college, and then I had to stop because it was plunging me with the amount of alcohol I consumed. And when I'd smoke pot, though, I knew I was an alcoholic back then, and when I smoked pot, I'd become very highly conscious of my alcoholism,
of how inebriated you just were. I have I'm a lifelong pothead, and while I certainly went through my drinking and other days, particularly in the rock and roll biz, weed has always been sort of my go-to. And I think what I learned from my heavy drinking friends is if you smoke weed first and then have a couple of drinks, you're fine. But if you're drunk and then you start getting high, you have almost a hallucinatory effect, and it can be very troublesome.
Well, the other thing is, and this is probably part of being younger, I suppose, but I get very introspective, and the stuff that would come up would just be shocking to me. And it was all they were all valid insights, but they were sort of like all Macy's Day Thanksgiving floats size. They were a little bit out of proportion.
Right.
And what happened is when I finally, all of the recovery people were like, when I finally started getting my shit together with the alcohol, and I'm like, okay. They're like, oh, if you smoke pot, then you're gonna relapse with alcohol, and that has not been I think that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I think that's interesting that you were told that. That's probably from the the hardcore alcohol people. Quite honestly, there are a number of folks in the medical marijuana movement who have used cannabis to get off of not only alcohol but harder drugs as well. And in fact, for a lot of neurological challenges, people with Parkinson's, for example, you know, the opioids that they get just couch lock them. You know, the benzos just couch lock them, and they smoke weed, and they can actually regain having some normalcy to their
Well,
life.
yes, and I, of course, was a late diagnosis of off the charts ADHD, and I had been using cannabis, you know, heavily. It still helps more than anything else. And I can get, the only thing I have to be careful because the other side of being a scatterbrain is hyper focus, where you just burrow into something and come out 3 days later and you're still working on the same video. But
that could be good. I mean,
it
focusing
can
art
be. I've gotten better. I
thing.
found it's there's something to be said for self-regulation, which is a phrase I've come across just recently. But I really, you know, I used to think the way to do everything was just like, I'm a dog and here's this bone, and I'm not going to move until I have chewed this bone completely, you know, till there's nothing left of it. And then I'll then I'll do the other bone.
That's funny. So tell me now, before we got started, you were telling me that you just got back from your pot shop. You live in tell me where you live.
Los Feliz, which is adjacent to maybe a slightly better known neighborhood called Silver Lake, but it's all east of Hollywood.
Okay.
And a bit less frenetic.
And you lived there for some time.
Many years. Yeah, I lived on the street for cumulatively 30 years. It's beautiful. It's like a tarot card. You know, this Pamela, I never say it was a tarot or tarot.
Tarot.
The art on those things, pointy trees, and then trees with like a ball stuck on the top of the stick. It's beautiful. I love this
Very
place.
Cool. Almost surreal. And you have a local pot shop there that you go to?
Yeah, it's I mean, I walk to it if I have to. It's like, you know, it's not a bad walk, but I wouldn't walk to it probably normally, but it's convenient. And I just recently, I hadn't been in there in a while, so they've got some stuff that's suiting my
What they hook you up with?
GMO cookies.
GMO cookies. So everybody's digging those cookies these days.
14
right?
ounces for, excuse me, ounces.
14 grams, hopefully not ounces. Yeah.
$40.
No, you got half an ounce for $40.
Yeah, and it's they say it's shake, but it looks more like small. It's good. It's
what we call smalls, or what we used to call popcorn nugs.
Yeah, a little grainier than that, but you know, it's nice. And
they sell that mostly for people who put it in cooking. Now, do you ever do any can of cooking? Do you make can of butter with your magic butter machine? It
was a disaster. It was just a disaster. I mean, I was trying to hide the smell from my ex, and you couldn't hide anything from her. So
was your ex not she was not a fan of your consumption?
I mean, she was like Joan of Arc, you know. I mean, her entire life, her lifetime consumption of alcohol and drugs was like 3 aspirin and a glass and a half of rosé.
So, you know, I mean, that's a big thing, right? I mean, if you and your significant other don't have a compatibility in terms of your cannabis use, that's a real problem.
Yeah,
sex and sativa.
Yeah. Women in general around here seem like if they like you enough, they seem like they put up with it. But I haven't met anyone who likes me enough, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. You guys, in theory, they'll tolerate it, but you know, that's
I'm just waiting for somebody to parachute through the ceiling into my.
Well, you know, after they see this podcast and they see just how goddamn charming you are, you know, I think that's what we'll do. So tell me a little bit about your art. What's your process? Do you have a regular routine? Because you paint, you do music, you have been a professional writer for many, many, many decades. Do you get up every morning and drink coffee and then write or paint or art, or is it just as the muse hits you?
It's like I usually it kind of rotates, and I've kind of gone back to music, although since it's combined with these weird videos I'm doing, I'm finishing. Well, I've got another one going today. I think you'll enjoy. They're also damn dark, though. I'm trying to.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask, and that's why I wondered: are you doing this late at night? They do seem kind of dark. I know on Marijuana Channel 1 we debuted the Wolves in the Woods, and man, that's just it's just a little bleak. What's going on, Caleb? Caleb, man, do we need to get you off the indica and on?
And then there's the one like with the kid with a gun, like it's called Rarely Loved.
And there's Angry, you know. I mean, you really.
Well, that's pretty upbeat, actually. Although he's saying he's referring to, I'm sure it's all in his imagination. These oligarchs lurking in their lair, and their mouths are stained with human blood. Their bodies have no hair. But he's I used to get so angry about that, but he's going like, but no, I'm totally still incredibly angry.
So, yeah. So, wow, what is your worldview now coming into? Because you, like me, have traveled the planet now a few cycles and have seen some evolution in the culture and in the arts. How you feeling about things these days?
Well, you've led me to an insight that it's like many of these things, when you're doing your own art or something, it's just right there in front of you. I don't analyze. I don't think like I want something that's going to evoke this feeling, blah, blah, blah. I just like start grabbing stuff. And it's just kind of like, I think we need a minor chord here, or cooking. It's like, it needs less salt, maybe, balance it with some sugar, and then put some soy sauce in it.
So whatever. you're just mise en scene. You're just reflecting what you're experiencing and leaving the analysis to the critics.
And I would say two things that are all, maybe three, that are all very kind of intertwined with cannabis, although, not that they wouldn't exist without it, but I used to be so stuck in cerebral, in the gourd up here. And that's why my relationships would always end up so badly, because I just processed everything intellectually. And I managed to, and it kept me from producing very much, because everything was such a strain. And then I learned to let go of that. And now as I work on these things, the thing I'm working on now, I'll show you later, but I'm like, wow, that's coming up from collective subconscious, because I just pick footage based on public domain, and also just how it's going to. I look at it as visual art that moves, which really surprised the hell out of me, because originally I started doing it just to have something to stick on in my music to upload. And now it's like, I'm more concerned with the visual part. I never thought
I was going to say, do you start with the music and then are inspired to write a soundtrack over it?
This one I'm doing today, which for some reason, it's given me the creeps or chill. I mean, it's poignant. It's like, wow, this is heavy. But I actually started just playing around with footage first. And then I recorded this song I wrote several years ago, and it's called Bluff. And I had a real kind of bad, not very good scratch tape of it, but I just finally did what was going to be a demo of it. But then I've learned a whole lot of stuff about engineering. And then that's another pastiche thing. I'm like, oh, I know, like this one track I'll double it and then bend them in different ways and then twist them together and all that stuff. So it's actually sounding really Elliott Smith, which is, I hope it's not that dark, because his stuff's beautiful, but was kind of a dark fellow.
So you're a Buddhist as well. Tell me about that.
Well, I was so vehemently opposed to joining a group that made me deal being, I mean, I used to hate like alcoholic, that's just, but I was gonna so badly avoid that cult that I joined a religion, so.
Although Buddhism, I mean, unlike some of the other Eastern religions, really isn't. It's more of a philosophy, right? I mean, there's no dogma to
It is,
Buddhism
that is a
for.
completely subjective, it depends very much on what part of the world you're in,
That's
because
true. There's lots of Buddhism. I guess I've spent when I talk about Buddhism, I come from the Allen Ginsberg, Alan Watts school of Zen,
no, but
consciousness, Suzuki, and
Ginsburg was not a Zenster. I knew him pretty well, and it turned out, he was into Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajrayana, and that's
he
what.
was a little bit more. That's right. He did. Yeah, but I mean that he was into the mythology of stuff, right? Moloch.
Tibetan Buddhism is a religion. That's what I practice. I thought I joined an agnostic philosophical fellowship. No, I'm into like way deeper into my grandfather was friends with a Catholic mystic, Thomas Merton, who's very Eastern oriented. And so I just like fell headlong into like the Tibetan version of deep Catholic mysticism, which means the better side of shit. It's
so tell me about you. So are you still practicing, or do you still consider Buddhism as your religion of choice?
Buddhism's my practice more than anything else.
Are you meditating? Do you meditate on a regular basis?
But I really started understanding myself better when I put all this ADHD stuff, and I realized that, Buddha gave a particular meditation to a musician named Vinapa, I believe. And someone wrote a whole paper in social psychology that this guy from the story manifested all the symptoms of ADHD. And if you put a guitar in his hand, he could meditate for 10 hours, and he became enlightened through meditating on the divine vibrations.
Vibrations, music. They say that David knew a chord that when he played, it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you?
Every one, right? Do you know that book, The Mysticism of Sound? It's by a Sufi guy, Hazrat somebody. I don't. Sufis are named Hazrat, but I can't believe I said but that was what,
and now you're on video saying
well,
that.
Sufism was my first my introduction to Eastern mysticism. There were actually my hometown around Frankfurt, there's more Sufis in those hills than there are anywhere else in the United States outside of Esalen.
It's a surfeit of Sufis.
There is
surplus of Sufis. I don't know. There's some kind of alliterative wit there. If I only had a brain, I could come up with it. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to talk about your art. We're talking about music now, and one of the things that you were hipping me to was sort of a confluence, if you will, of that yoga, mystic sort of meditative practice and music. And so you're kind of innovating around a concept called guitar yoga. Tell me about that a little bit.
You ever taken a Kundalini yoga class?
No, I don't.
Well,
I have not.
In one tradition, it's called Kundalini. In Tibetan, it's called Mahamudra, or at least more the Himalayan region. But it all is dealing with chakras, channels in the energy system. Sort of the astral spine.
Yes, I've seen the posters with the chakras.
And that stuff's kind of not the easiest thing to practice. But I found I had a moment several years ago. My mother was dying. I felt like my life had gone completely to hell. And I had just hung on to the guitar like a life preserver. And my mother was like that with the piano as well. I'm like, what is it? And I just started thinking about some of those more energetic forms of meditation, and how if you connect that to sound, it's like you're just
Yeah.
really connecting with a current that is something far more profound than thwackety thwack thwack. It's life force. It's a very, very specific
Well, and
spectrum of
particularly in the
libido.
guitar, because it's a resonation box, right?
Yes.
And essentially, you are also a vessel that resonates along with the strings and the flat top.
Yeah, and you're holding it against your core and you're absorbing those. I think
Yeah.
really I've become a lot more woo woo than I ever thought. But people are doing these sound baths where they go and boom, whether it's a gong or something else. But think about it homeopathically. We don't those. I think a real Sufi mystic would say those vibrations are too gross. The vibrations of a guitar hold against your core. Think about guitar yoga. Part of it's listening meditation, and just getting people. It's more about presence because everything is so technique focused. So, if I could get people to just who already play guitar to slow down a bit and just remember vibration. That's about all. But it's a non-linear way of playing, or maybe it's just the opposite. It's a linear way of playing, and that the guitar is tuned to an open chord.
Is it a drop G? Are you doing the drop G? Is that what it is?
Oh, there's different ones. I think I like to start people out at like a C sharp because the strings are really, really loose. And you can bend them and hammer them, and because there's a hump to get over with guitar that most people
Oh, the
don't
guitar's a lifelong it's a lifelong endeavor. And the guitar is interesting. One day you'll pick it up and you'll be amazed at the magic that comes out of your fingers. It just all works well. And other times you pick it up and you just can't get anything to work.
But there's a
At least
pain factor, though, just the fact that you
gotta get the blisters on. What did Lennon say? I got blisters on me fingers.
Yeah, you don't have to do that with piano. I mean, it tests you in other ways. But so the deal is like, I think a lot of, if you're like a 10-year-old kid, and the stuff they lay on kids, as far as I can see, come home and like you've got to sit in front of sheet music for a half hour, and who the hell would want that after a full day of school? But this, if you tune to an open chord, it's like, here, you strum, just sit with it. You don't have to learn a song. You can pick a string.
Discovery is the best. I used to say to my students, there is no wrong in art. Create anything. Is this okay? It's like, hey, there's no wrong in art. There's no wrong in music either. It may not please other folks, but what the hell, what the heck?
Yeah.
We're not looking to, become top of the pops anyway.
Don't you think that a whole lot of it would be, though, progress I've made on the guitar is that I already kind of figured out something, but somebody who really knew how to play would like, yeah, that's right. But they kind of like corrected. So now you're validated because you're thinking before. It's like, this is kind of cool, but I know I'm just a turd.
Yeah.
So it's all about validation. Like the La Brea tar pits in a way. It's like the best art, you just get out of the way, let it sort of seep up like this boiling tar that it is. And in that, there's dinosaur bones and 3-year-old kids and, Jimmy Hoffa. And
and you can never get it off it's kind of like the smell of bong water in your Econoline van carpet. Once it's expressed, it never really goes away.
Yeah. Sulfurous. It makes you believe in the underworld, doesn't it?
Caleb, Camus, I want to do this, man. We got to do it. There's all kinds of stuff. We're going to do a session on guitar yoga, and I think we're going to have everybody pull out their guitars and play around a little bit. It's good to catch up with you. I hope you will, consent to be back on Marijuana Channel 1. And
Anytime.